So hello, I'm Paul, I'm driver 28, and this is a tour, this is a Taxitrax tour of West Belfast. It's mainly the murals, but sometimes you get a little bit of our history or culture, some of our churches. So we're just going to start our tour here. This here wall, this is called the Welcome Wall. So no matter what country you're from, we bring you here first, and it's to say welcome to West Belfast. And it shows everything about West Belfast, everything good about West Belfast. It shows our buildings. It shows our parts of our jobs. This is one of our drivers. You can see the badge, and you can see my badge. So this is one of the longest drivers on the road. This is Shackled Road too. He's on the taxis from the heart of the Troubles right the way through, and he's living through a pandemic now as well. So we could write a book about Shimmy here. Other people you can see on the wall, as I say, they're all real people. We've got our local celebrities. Michael Conley here. This is one of our local boxers, young man from Beachmount. So we're celebrating West Belfast on this wall here as well. Okay. If we can move on down just a little bit over here. So again, it's celebrating our sports. You've got Gaelic football, you've got hurling, you've got another tour guide in here as well. So it's showing our tour guides aren't just in taxis, they're on foot as well. And you've got one of the most famous people on the Falls Road, one of the most famous people in Ireland. You've got James Conley here. Yeah. So I always ask this question to every tourist I bring here. But, they all know an awful lot about James Conley. They know about the 1916 Rising. They know about his trade union links. Most of them know, especially the people that were taken from West Belfast, that James Conley actually lived on the Falls Road. It's a dentist on up facing the city cemetery, and you'll see a plaque above the door explaining that James Conley lived there when he stayed in Belfast through his trade union links. But there's one question I always ask, and so many people seem to get it wrong, especially people from the south of Ireland, especially people from Dublin. It's, where was James Conley from? So this is when the head scratching starts and the guesses start Dublin and he's Cork. Well, no. He was actually born and he grew up in Edinburgh. So he was a Scottish guy. He wasn't Irish. So I love when I get people up from Dublin because they know so much about the Easter Rising, and I always catch them out with that one. So the welcome wall, the welcome mural, it's a brand new mural. It was only painted last year. You can see the dates here. 25th of June 2019. This is our local artist, Mickey Dock, Marty Lance. It was also unveiled by our Lord Mayor. Our Lord Mayor is John Finucane. John made a bit of history in 2019. And the history that he made was he stood in British elections in North Belfast. North Belfast, that constituency, it used to be known as Duncarn. In that constituency, a Catholic has never held a seat, parliamentary seat, in North Belfast in the history of Northern Ireland, right back to 1921. And John stood in this election this year, and he won it. And he won it with quite a big margin. I think it was around about 5,000 votes. So John actually made a massive bit of history here. If anyone doesn't know who John Finucane is, apart from being a local councillor, being our Lord Mayor, his father was Pat Finucane. So Pat Finucane was a human rights lawyer here in Belfast, and he fought in many, many cases. In 1989, John was only 7 years of age. He was sitting in his home with his mother's father, sister and brother. Gunmen smashed his front door in and they murdered his father in front of him. So as a 7-year-old, that's what he's seen. I'm glad to say John moved in the right directions, the directions that most people want today, and he moved towards politics. And he is still fighting for the truth behind his father's murder. But he's also fighting for the people of West Belfast, the people of North Belfast, the people of Belfast generally, no matter what religion, creed or colour. So I suppose he's one of our celebrities too. Alright, so we're going to move on here. A wee, very, very short distance up the wall called the International Wall. So just a wee short distance here up the International Wall. And these murals change from time to time. The change depend on what's happening, not just in Ireland, but in the world generally. And you'll see that, and you'll see two new murals, and the two new murals have to do with events that's happening now, that's still happening. So this is the International Wall here, and it tells itself why it's called the International Wall. It has an international theme. So there's a few new murals on it here, as you can see. We've got the brand new one, George Lloyd. I think everyone knows what's going on with George Lloyd, and I think the people of West Belfast and the Falls Road, we all want to show our support for Black Lives Matter, and this is why this mural was done here. And we're going to get tourists from all over the world, and we're going to point out our support for Black Lives Matter. Also got a new one here too, people that we really do support as well, is our NHS staff. This is a very, very recent, very new one, and again it explains itself. Because there's no one in the island of Ireland and Britain that isn't supporting the NHS at the moment through this pandemic. And this year's going to be here for years to come. It's not going to go away, so it's not once this pandemic's over. So I hope the people that are supporting the NHS now, they're going to support us in the future, or support them in the future, sorry. So again, the international theme down here, you can't see Palestine. So again, along the Falls Road, West Belfast, you would see an awful lot of support for Palestine, and this is what this is showing. So we've got the black taxis here. The black taxis are on the road 50 years now, and they came on for a simple reason, because the transport structure here was non-existent. You can imagine what was happening along this road. Riots was breaking out, and when the riots broke out, they barricaded the roads, and something that made a very, very good barricade was a bus. So you put a bus across this road, it blocked the road. But the British Army, they had the type of vehicles, they could just push that bus off the road. So what you done was you set the bus on fire. It was full of fuel, they weren't going to push it off the road then. But that left a problem, and the problem was no transport system. So a few clever guys went to England, some of the ones that were in the city centre, and they started to taxi on this road. But it wasn't taxiing anymore, it was a bus service. So that's why we're part of public transport, that's why we are taxi buses, not taxis. But you can imagine at the start, there wasn't that many taxis on, all of these people in queues waiting to get in. So our black taxis hold 6 people. They don't anyway at the minute because of the pandemic, they hold 4. But normally they hold 6. But they didn't hold 6 then. They held as many as you could get in there. So you'd have had 2 squished into the front, you'd have had a board across the back seats, you'd have had at least 3 on the other side, with people sitting on their knees. So it was just packed, absolutely packed. But the one thing about it was a great meeting place. There was no mobile phones then. You wouldn't take your mobile phone out and sit the way people do now. So what you had to do was talk to someone. So you talk to the people across me, you made friends. I know people that actually, relationships came out of black taxis. Now I have to be very careful the way I say this here, because I did say this very wrong at one time, and I said my friend and his wife got together in the back of a black taxi. Then I realised what I was saying, so I withdrew it and I rephrased it. So people did meet. You can imagine, a young guy, he's sitting in the corner, squished in the corner. There's a pretty young girl sitting over across from him. He's trying to chat away there, all these faces and people smoking and all of them things that went on there. He works up the courage. Do you fancy going out? Do you fancy going to the cinema? It was called the pictures then, by the way. Do you fancy going to the pictures? Yeah, why not? So that's it. He got himself a girlfriend, she got himself a boyfriend. Maybe that young couple went out together for a year or 2 and they decided to get married. Marriages weren't the same then. They weren't £30,000 weddings. They were, you went to church, you got married, you went to a social club, you had a few beers, a couple of drinks, and you went home. Also too, people didn't have money for big limousines. So maybe that young couple again went back to the same black taxi driver and said, look, we're getting married next month. Could you take the bride to the church? So, police this taxi up, ribbons on it, it's a limousine. So all of these uses, you would have seen if there was a parade, Féile and Fóbla parade, if you'd have seen a Republican funeral, black taxis across the front, black taxis across the back, also protecting people. So that's why the black taxis, we became such a massive part of the community in West Belfast. See any parking up there, we'll just park down here. So this is the International Wall. So you just have a quick glance at it and you can see why it's called the International Wall. It has an international theme. So the other thing that you can see is the gates here. This is the divide. So this is basically the end of Catholic West Belfast. You go across here, you've got West and North Belfast. the second set of gates, this is the first, second set of gates, it takes you into the Shackled Road, into Protestant West Belfast. Right? Well, the thing is that a lot of people from here don't realise that these gates close every night. At 7 o'clock at night, the gates will close open. There's 5 sets of gates the whole way up them. 4 of them close at 7 o'clock, one of them is opened about 9:30, and then that's it, closed. So you can still get across there obviously at night, but you have to take a big detour to get there. So the international fleet, you can see it in this, you can see all these famous faces that you're going to recognise. You're going to recognise Barack Obama up here, and you've got the slave ship in the background with Barack Obama. So a lot of people don't realise, even people that live here, the slave trade that went on in Ireland, especially the 17th century. And Irish people, they weren't called slaves, they were called indentured servants. And I think it was a nice way of making a white man a slave, was to change the name of it to indentured servant. So what they done was, they took you on a slave ship to the West Indies, places like that, and they sold you basically to a master, which you called master. But the difference between the slaves and the indentured servant was they give you a time limit, almost like a prison. So they would give you 7 years, 10 years. You worked that out, and then you got your freedom. You didn't get any extra money to live on or anything, but you got supposedly your freedom. The biggest problem was Irish people. An awful lot of us Irish are redheads. So you can imagine a big ginger guy getting sent out to the West Indies. He wasn't going to last very long. He was going to die of tropical disease. He was going to die of just pure heat exhaustion. So in Ireland we did have our own slave trade. It run from Ireland. Oliver Cromwell was a great man for sending people into slavery. Charles I, Charles II, they were all great people for sending people into slavery. So you can see the first black American president. You've got this guy, the big guy in the middle here, which an awful lot of people don't know who he is. And you're not really supposed to know who he is. It really has to do with American politics, American history. But his name's Frederick Douglass. So Frederick was born a slave. He was very, very well educated man, but he was self-educated. He was taught the alphabet as a young man, and he taught himself how to read and write. He became a free man. He spent the rest of his life publicising, letting people know the evilness of slavery, also letting them know that slavery hadn't run away. And I think that we found, now we're right in the 21st century, we found that we know that slavery hasn't run away. Every now and again we're getting containers turning up, people from our own country that have unfortunate people in the back of these containers, and these people are slaves. So Frederick Douglass, great man. So again, the other people in the mural here that you'll recognise, you may recognise Martin Luther King. And the lady at the top with the afro. I'm doing this here, I'm watching stuff.
Angela Davis.
Angela Davis. So the lady at the top with the afro, that's Angela Davis. Human rights activist, but sometimes when we bring American tourists here, they would describe Angela as a terrorist because she was a member of the Black Panthers. So some Americans see her as a great civil rights activist, other Americans see her again as a terrorist. The last little bit on this wall here, you can see there's a lady here with a big axe through her face in the middle of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela there. So that axe wasn't put on her face, that's not vandalism, was that? Her name, and I'm going to pronounce this totally wrong, but it's the best I can do, is San Suu Kyi. She is the president of Burma, it's called Myanmar now, and she was given the Nobel Peace Prize, believe it or not. But then the world realised that her country wasn't this beautiful, peaceful country that everyone thought it was. In fact, 10,000 Muslims have went missing in her country under her presidency. So the Nobel Peace people got it wrong, but also our artist got it wrong. So what he done was, instead of erasing her off the wall, he came back with his paintbrush and he put a bloody axe to her face. So that's the artist protest, you can see. So this is a mural of Bobby Sands. This is one of the most, and not one of the most, this is the most famous mural on the Falls Road. This is, we get people from America, from Canada, from all over the world, and they seem to know about this mural and they want to come and see it. So I think most people know about Bobby Sands, people from Ireland anyway, that he died in hunger strike in 1981 after 66 days. He was followed by 9 men and all 10 died on hunger strike, and they died because of political status. Political status did exist in the prison here, a concentration camp, Long Cache. In 1976, the British government decided to take political status away. In other words, it decided to criminalise Bobby Sands and all the other political prisoners. So these guys weren't going to stand for it, and they were going to create protests. The first protest was the blanket protest, where they refused to wear prison uniforms, which was part of their criminalisation. So they put blankets around them, and that's how they wandered about. Years and years on end, they escalated the blanket protest into what was known as the dirty protest, where they smeared their faces on the walls of the cells, on the walls, wherever they could smear, they smeared it to make things as difficult and to show the world that they were fighting for political status. So the thing of Bobby Sands, very, very well known in West Belfast, because he was a West Belfast lad. He started off in Newton Abbey in Rátáil. And then whenever Bobby was living there, that's when the sectarian divide started. That's when people started to be burnt out of their houses. And Bobby wasn't burnt out of his house, but they were intimidated out of their house. They moved to Twinbrook, and he took part in Twinbrook, in the community in Twinbrook. He worked as part of a community worker until he was caught and he was given his jail sentence. When he was given his jail sentence, he became the commander in his wing in the H blocks. And whenever the hunger strike was decided that they were going to go on hunger strike, Bobby Sands, he stood forward and he decided if his men were going to go on hunger strike, he was going to go on first. So again, as you know, Bobby Sands went on hunger strike and he died in 1981. But people say, was that a waste? Was it a waste of a great man? Was it a waste of a great life? Well, you've got the answer today. Because discrimination, we've almost eradicated discrimination, religious discrimination here. There's no more Harland and Wolff with 35,000 workers, 34 Protestants and 1,000 Catholic. That's all been eradicated. And that's what people like Bobby Sands was fighting for. And that's what people like Bobby Sands changed. So again, whilst Bobby Sands was on hunger strike, he stood in British elections in Fermanagh South Tyrone. And of course he won that election. They won it with a good, sizable majority. That changed things here. Republicans, they started to look, if Bobby Sands done this here politically, maybe we could do it. Maybe we can make an even bigger change by moving down the road of politics. So you start to hear phrases like the Armalite and the ballot box. So it wasn't the Armalite anymore, the ballot box was being mentioned. And I think if you see the local elections and the success of Sinn Féin, you have to put it down directly to people like Bobby Sands, who were brave enough to go into politics and brave enough to die for their beliefs. So where we are now, we're in Bombay Street. This is one of our memorial gardens. They're scattered throughout the Falls Road. If you take a wee stroll along the Falls Road, you'll not be too far away from a memorial garden. This here one tells of what happened in 1969, in August 1969. This street here, this was attacked. We've got the Peace Wall here, if you look in the background. A big high fence. And the Peace Wall wasn't here in 1969, of course, it wasn't. So you had two communities here. You had a Protestant community of the Shankill Road across here, and you had the Clonard community, which was predominantly Catholic. 1969, everything broke down here. It broke down throughout the north, but in Belfast it was a lot worse. On the Falls Road in this area, rioting had broke out. A large number of the Protestant community, accompanied by the Beast Specials, and the Beast Specials was part of the police force here. They were like an ancillary police force. So the Beast Specials, along with the Protestant community, came in here. They attacked this area and they attacked this street. Bombay Street, as you can see it now, this was just burnt to the ground. Every house in this street, and then they moved on street after street, burning street after street down. This area, there was no defences in this area. The Earraigh did exist then. They were small. They were, as far as weaponry, it was almost non-existent in this area, so they couldn't really defend this area. The Earraigh, the people in this area, they actually almost attacked the Earraigh. They would have wrote slogans on the walls like Earraigh, I ran away. Right. So what you did get happening here, the Irish Taoiseach was Jack Lynch, and he was calling for United Nations to be brought in here. He knew that a bloodbath was about to take place. But the British government, they said no, it's our territory. We'll sort the problems out ourselves. And the way they decided to sort the problems out was to send the British Army in here. So when the British Army marched onto the Falls Road, August 1969, they stayed there for about 2 days and then they came into the Clonard area. And when they first marched into the Clonard area, the Catholic community welcomed them. They clapped them, they brought them cups of tea, sandwiches, they done things like that because they thought there's no one else here. There's no one else to protect us, to defend us, to stop our homes being burnt to the ground. But there was a big problem there. The British Army actually weren't brought in for that reason. They were brought in here to keep the status quo. In other words, to keep everything as it was before. For Northern Ireland to be dominated with a unionist government, a unionist police force, the British Army were in to back up that police force. The same police force in the form of the B Specials that came in here and burnt this housing estate to the ground. So whenever that realisation kicked in, the people in this area obviously turned on the British Army and they didn't want the British Army here anymore. Also too, which I should have mentioned at the start here, the British Army were attacked when they first came in here, and they were attacked by the Protestant community. I remember seeing an interview of a soldier, and a soldier saying it was so unreal. There was stones, there was battles, there was even gunfire, but these people that were shooting at us and throwing at us were waving Union Jacks. It was totally unreal. So again, the British Army, people in this area that didn't want the British Army here anymore, the realisation had kicked in, the real reason why they were here was to keep the Northern Ireland state as the Northern Ireland state with all its discrimination. So this is the Peace Wall. We're in the Shankill end of the Peace Wall now. Where we were before Clonard, it's just in behind this wall here too. So this is 50 years old now, believe it or not. And it wasn't always this height. You can see the concrete part of it. Originally it was just the concrete part, but it wasn't high enough because both sides could throw back and forward at each other. And they came in and put the green bit on it here. Still wasn't high enough. It still could throw back and forward. And eventually it ended up the height it is now. So, I mean, this is our own Berlin Wall. 50 years on, I think a lot of people like myself thought at the start of the Good Friday Agreement that this wall would have been down within 10, 20 years. Supposedly there is a date for it to come down, it's 2023, but personally I can't see it happening. I think if anything, Brexit put a stop to that because Brexit pulled these two communities apart again, and this wall here reinforces it. It makes people feel safe. People in the Shankill feel safe. It makes people in Clonard feel safe. So unfortunately, I think we're looking at this for the future. It's used also too by our local artists. It mightn't look much to you now, but the graffiti artists come along and they put their work on it. And a lot of them leave light colours here. And they leave light colours here so you can see what happens. The tourists from all around the world, they like to put their name on the wall, they like to put the country they're from. Some of them write a nice message, a nice peace message on the wall. The only thing we're not allowed to put on the wall, and we always tell our tourists, no swear words. So now we're on the Shackled Road here, and you can see the murals here. The murals is totally changed. You won't get any more, obviously, Irish Republican, or you won't get anything to do with Ireland. So now you're in British territory, so you're going to get, the murals are going to turn to the theme of Britain. And you have Queen Elizabeth II here, the longest reigning monarch in history. And this is what you can see on the Shankill. You see the people of the Shankill expressing their Britishness, expressing their culture, and expressing their history. If you were to look down the Shackled Road, you'll see the Union Jacks, you'll see the Northern Ireland flag, and they're showing it by putting flags up, by putting bunting across the road. And these bunting, these flags is also to celebrate the 12th of July celebration. So in other words, the Battle of the Point. So again, here we're on the Shankill here too, and this mural here, this is another really good example of the people of Shankill showing their culture, their history. So this is a massive piece of history, this here. This is a signing of the Ulster Covenant. So there was proposals made in the British Parliament, and what these proposals were, there was twice in the 19th century and once in the early 20th century. The proposals was for a Home Rule Bill. So the whole of Ireland was going to get a Home Rule Bill, just the same as Canada, same as Australia. And this Home Rule Bill failed to go through the Houses of Parliament twice. But on the third time, with a Liberal government, it did go through. So it was all set that Ireland was going to become almost part of the Commonwealth. It was going to have its own rule. The Queen, or the King as it was then, would be the figurehead, but we would have basically a whole Ireland. People obviously were against that. The Unionists were against that. And Lord Carson here, a Dublin barrister, he formed an organisation, and the organisation became known as the UVF. So the UVF were formed, and they were formed to fight against the Home Rule Bill. They actually formed an army, and the army were prepared to go to war to keep Ireland as part of Britain. So Lord Carson, the Shankill Road and places like that there, he is obviously one of the heroes of the army. The other wee bits about Lord Carson was he had a great legal mind. A lot of people don't realise that. When you go into his history, his career, he's a very, very famous barrister, not in Ireland, mainly in England. He spent most of his time in London. So hello folks, we're back here on the Falls Road, we're back at the International Wall. So this is the end of our short tour. I hope you enjoyed it. If you come on a tour, we will go into much more detail. But thanks very much for watching. I'm Paul, I'm driver 28, and thank you for watching again.